안녕하세요. I'm Caitlin and welcome to the Fluent in 3-Month YouTube channel. Today we are going to be talking all about Korean culture. So if you are a huge K-pop fan, K-drama fan, all about everything Korean pop entertainment movies, all of it, like I am, then stick around because we are going to be diving in to everything Korean culture. I always emphasize when it comes to learning a language is that you have to learn the culture. If you are not immersing yourself in the culture, it's really hard to actually become fluent in the language and even just to have like normal everyday conversations, right? Because if you think about how we talk in English, we often talk about things that we care about in pop culture and just our culture in general, right? We talk about food, and a lot of our family events and events with friends happen around food. So you want to understand food culture and things like that. So culture plays such a big role in understanding the Korean language, and that's why I am going to tell you all about it in this video. First, let's talk about Hangul. Hangul is the Korean writing system, and it was actually made for Koreans to learn how to read easier. So while it looks complicated, if you're an outsider looking in, you have no concept of what it's like, Hangul's actually made to help learners learn how to read Korean as easy as possible. It was designed that way. You can actually learn Hangul in as little as like 15 minutes. Because of that, Korea actually has one of the highest literacy rates in the world and some of the most amazing literature. We can't talk about Korean culture without talking about Confucianism, because Confucianism plays such a big role in the overall social hierarchy and social exchanges that you see in Korean in everyday life. When it comes to Confucianism, one of the big things about it is maintaining your face, right? And a lot of times we think about this almost like a mask we wear to protect ourselves. So in Korea, there's this like proper face that everyone has to wear. And it's your polite manners. It's how you represent your family. It is how people perceive you and the vibe you want to give off. If you think about it, we do this in English too, and all over the world really now because of social media. A lot of social media now is very similar to this concept of face. So when it comes to Confucianism in Korean society, it plays a role in how you talk to other people in Korean. And this is largely based on your age. So if you are the younger person in this social situation, then you would use more formal endings and more formal speech when you're talking to the person that is older than you or in a higher status, like a boss or someone like that, right? In this case, you would use the 예요 or the 인다 endings in Korean. 인다 is the most formal. And this is called honorific speech. And a lot of Korean culture centers around this honorific speech and this polite speech that you have to use in order to maintain your face in Korean society. Now, as a foreigner, you are less expected to follow these social customs, but if you truly want to seem like you're fluent in the language, then you need to understand this. Now, you may be wondering though, what if you don't know the person's age? What if they seem like they're really close in age to you? This is actually why asking someone's age is a really common first question when you get to know someone, because that's how you set the social standard for the conversation going forward. However, there is one more thing to note about Korean age. How to work out your Korean age. Okay, so let's talk about Korean age and how to figure out your age in Korean, because it is different in South Korea. Because in South Korea, there are two things that change your age. One is that they actually count you as being one from the day that you're born. So they count all of your time in your mom's womb as your first year of life. So when you're born, you are already one. The other thing about Korean culture is that on New Year's Day, everyone turns a year older. That's just like universal age celebration, right? Now, when your birthday comes around, you'll still celebrate your birthday. That's still your actual birthday, but you don't actually age on that day because you already aged on January 1st of that year. Now, sometimes you may even need to add 2 years to your age depending on where your birthday falls and where it is in the year. So if January 1st is already passed and your birthday has not happened yet, then you need to add 1 year. But you also need to add the year that you were in your mom's womb. Of course, if that seems confusing to you, you can always ask a Korean person what your age should be in Korea. Another thing you'll notice about Korean culture is that they actually don't use the word no too often, especially when they're turning down a request, because it can come off as like too harsh to be like, 아니요. You'll hear them say that, of course. It's not like they never say no, but it also depends on your situation, how close you are to the person that you're saying no to. So if it's a more formal situation, Koreans often feel kind of embarrassed to say no, so they'll try to like backtrack a little bit and be like, I don't know. And even still, there are some situations where you can just never refuse. For instance, it is very common to go out with your coworkers after work and drink soju. And when you're drinking that, other people will refill your drink for you. You never refill your own drink. And when they refill your drink, you don't want to turn them down no matter what, even if you're done. Just don't drink it. Using honorifics. The most common way to show someone respect in Korean is to say their last name plus she. So she is kind of like Mr. or Miss in Korean. And so, for instance, you might say Kim Shi, and that would be Mr. Kim. Now, when it comes to someone that you're closer to, you can still show them respect, but also in a more casual way. So if their name ends in a consonant, you can add a to the end. And if their name ends with a vowel, then you can add ya. And that makes it sound a lot more casual when you're showing them respect. Going back to my inheritors example, Kim Tan, his mom often calls him Tana, and that's Tan, his first name, plus A. So she is being casual while also showing her son a little bit of respect. So if you're going to South Korea for the first time, there can be a lot of things that are a little bit of a culture shock depending on what country you come from. But knowing these things will help you put your best foot forward. So let's jump right to it. Number 1, always take your shoes off at the door. It is considered extremely gross and dirty to walk throughout the house with your shoes on. So make sure you take them off at the door. This is like one of the most common Westerner mistakes, is to leave your shoes on when you go into someone's house in Korea, but also Japan, and you really don't want to do that. Number 2, when you greet someone for the first time, it is polite to bow. Now, when you bow, it does depend on the level of respect you have to show for the other person, but typically a slight nod of the head will do. If it's someone you need to show a little bit more respect to, you can bend from your torso, from your hips, and get a little slight bend. The deeper the bow, the more reverence you're showing, but typically any deeper than that, like just like this, is too much. So a little head bow, a little bit from the shoulders if you have to be more polite, maybe to a boss that you're being introduced for the first time, that's totally fine in most situations. If you are gonna shake hands, you shake hands with 2 hands like this, or you put one hand on your stomach and shake with your other hand. And if you do that, it is polite to bow a little bit while you do that. Number 4, it is not common to hold the door open in South Korea. So if someone walks in front of you and they don't hold the door open for you, they're not trying to be rude. It's just not common in South Korea. So they're not purposely trying to let the door slam in your face. If you watched Crash Landing on You, there is a scene where Captain Ri, my favorite human being, he becomes viral on YouTube just because he was holding the door open for people for so long. And his character on that show is from North Korea. And so he was being extra polite, but that's not common in South Korea. And they thought that it was so wild that this very handsome looking gentleman was holding the door open for so long. 5, when you sneeze, you will be ignored. Sneezing is kind of something that people get embarrassed about a little bit, and a lot of times, you know, anytime anyone has allergies or any flu-like symptoms in Asian countries, they wear masks, right? So if they sneeze, it's a little bit embarrassing and people will just kind of ignore you and pretend like it didn't happen. So there is no God bless you in Korean like there is in Western countries. 6, you will be bumped into when you're walking around. And again, this is not rude. It's just, it's crowded and people need to get around. So there is a lot of bumping when you're walking around, especially in some of the more crowded spaces and cities, but just know that's just how it is. Number 7, take and receive gifts with both hands. It's very important and very polite that if you receive something from someone else, whether it's a business card or a gift, that you take it with both hands and you kind of bow a little bit while you take it and you thank them for it. The same is true if you're giving a gift. You hold it out with both hands. This is polite and it shows that it's something that you care about, that you're showing that item a little bit of reverence out of respect for the person who's giving it to you. Number 8, trash cans are super hard to find. South Korea is very strict of how items are sorted and disposed of, and they have a really large recycling program as well. So things have to be cleaned and sorted and thrown away in a specific way, or you can actually be fined for it. So there's not a lot of trash cans around for that reason, yet the country still stays completely clean. So what people do instead is they end up actually just carrying around their trash with them until they get home and they can properly sort it. Number 9, bathrooms may look very different. While it is more common nowadays for big hotels and things like that in the big cities to have more Western bathrooms, you still may come across some very, very Korean style bathrooms. And in these bathrooms, the showers may not be installed, so the floors are very wet, and there may just be a hole in the floor to go to the bathroom. These are called squatting toilets, and they are a bit unusual to get used to, but that is a traditional Korean bathroom. And lastly, number 10, going back to the bathroom again, but this is really helpful to know. You may not find toilet paper in the bathrooms because of the plumbing system, especially in more rural areas in Korea. There's not a lot of toilet paper because it would clog the system. And if there is toilet paper, then you actually need to throw it away instead of putting it down the squatting toilet. So usually there will be a sign for that. And you do want to make sure you can read those Korean signs so that you know how to use the bathroom in Korea. But that is one of the things that happens. I have heard of some foreigners who go to Korea and actually keep toilet paper like in their bag with them so that if they come across that situation, they're not out of luck. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching this video all about Korean customs, traditions, and culture. I hope you found it a little bit insightful and helpful, something a little bit different from your language learning routine. And if you want to know more, I actually packed an article full of even more facts about Korean culture. It is super helpful, especially if you plan on going to South Korea anytime soon. So make sure to check out the link below in the description box and read the rest of the article. Super helpful. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, comment below, and let us know what else you'd like to see about Korea, and share it with your friends if you find it helpful. And as always, make sure to subscribe to the Fluent 3-Month YouTube channel to get more language hacking content. Thanks for joining me, guys. 안녕히 가세요. Want to know the best way to learn Korean? Well, then you need to check out 90-Day Korean. 90-Day Korean is my favorite resource for learning Korean and the way that I learned Korean when I was getting started. It is the best, most complete resource for learning Korean that you'll ever find. They have purposely broken it down into easy lessons for beginners so that you can really start learning and speaking the language from day one. There's a link in the description box below for 90-Day Korean, and I highly recommend you check it out so that way you can start speaking Korean today.